Like I said, my name is John Spalding from NEXUSforChange.org. I'm going to transition now. I'll be over in the chat room. I wanted to hand it off to Stan Horvitz from the International Society for Organization Development and Change, and he's going to kick off our session, and then we will quickly get to Dr. Stephen Cady from Bowling Green State University, who's going to be our presenter for today. So thanks, guys, for coming, and Stan, why don't you kick us off?
Switch screens over, John.
Well, thanks, John, and welcome to everybody. And it's great to be with you in our time this evening and your time midday. Just by way of introduction, and thanks, Steve, for your cooperation and for volunteering to kick off our series for the year. Just by way of introduction, for those who don't know Steve, Steve is an associate professor of management. He's the director of the Institute for Organizational Effectiveness and a former director of the Master of OD program at Bowling Green State University in the US. Steve served as the chief editor of the OD Journal, and we'll speak a little bit later more about the OD Journal. He's currently the chief editor and curator of the Organizational Change and Innovation Collection for BKPDA, and he's co-editor of the Change Handbook and founder of Nexus for Change. And really, Nexus for Change is a global community of practitioners, leaders, scholars such as yourselves, students, activists, all utilizing collaborative dialogue, change methods in a way of effecting change in society and the world at large and in organizations. In addition to Steve's scholarly activities, he consults and speaks internationally on collaborative change and personal growth, and is really focused on people development and really about positivity in the world, which is in chaos, as we were talking about a little bit earlier, Steve. So certainly on behalf of ISODC, we'd like to welcome you. Thank you for your participation, for your collaboration, and John, to you too. And we're really looking forward to a great session with you, Steve. Thank you.
Thanks, Stan. I appreciate that. John, you might want to close the poll and get the screen up when you're ready. There's Stan. Hey, now we see you. All right.
Okay.
All right. So, John, you ready for me to get started? What's the plan here?
Yep, I'm just transferring ownership now.
All right. All right. There we go. So you can hit the record if you haven't yet, and this will be provided for later consumption for everybody here. We've got a great group of people here from all around the world, so it's really awesome to be here. And Stan, it's good to have you here, and John, thank you for getting everything organized. John, do you have everything? Am I ready to get started?
Yep, you're ready.
You guys see my screen okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, cool. So, collaborative change events, blending methods for maximum impact is the focus for today. And I'm really excited to talk about this. And it's going to be a bit of a whirlwind of a webinar today, and I want to take you through a lot. We can always dive into future webinars, drilling in on many of these areas. This is going to give you a nice introduction into this body of knowledge, this emerging field of practice and scholarship that I think is really important in our world, particularly now. The collaborative change is, let me go over here and get this here. Collaborative change, the way I think about it, it's a shift in the intentions and actions of stakeholder groups. And it can be diverse stakeholder groups, disparate stakeholder groups, but any stakeholder groups that come together and there's a need to shift their intention and action directed towards some particular result. What I would say the main selling point, I believe, for collaborative change is the push versus the pull. It is so important when we bring people together and when we're trying to move in a direction that our world is moving from a place of pushing people to get things done to a pull. And collaborative change really provides that pull. It leverages strengths and it builds on and connects to the history of the group and the people that are involved. It's also increases awareness, and in increasing that awareness, it creates a collective intelligence where there's purposeful intention, wise choices, and robust implementation. And what I mean by robust implementation is there's a lot of projects, a lot of change initiatives that are created, and these plans are put together, people come together, and they have the best of intentions. When done collaboratively, they are robust. That means the design is going to lead to the intended results in spite of violations or problems with the assumptions in the original design. So the more collaborative a initiative is, the more able it is to work through all the tough things and the unexpected events that always occur within the context of any change. So got a poll here for you. I'd like to know which of these four you particularly identify with. So do you, when you are in change and are dealing with change, do you roll up your sleeves and get right to work? Do you evaluate the evidence to ensure that it's moving in the right direction? Do you understand how others are impacted and feeling? Or do you allow the universe and God to inform the work as it unfolds? So John, are you putting the poll out there? There it is. Yep. So go ahead and pick one. And Stan, which one would you pick here? You can only pick one.
All. Probably all.
You can't pick all.
Probably the energy relationship.
What's that?
Energy relationship, probably. The relationship part, building people together, getting the world, understand how it impacts on other people and how they feel.
Understand how
that way it should guide the rest of what's happening.
That's what you'd pick?
Yeah.
John, which one would you pick if you had to pick one?
Yeah, I would pick the third one as well.
Understand how others are impacted and feeling. Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead and show us the results. So we've got 17% will roll up their sleeves, 40 and 43 will evaluate and understand how others are impacted, and 0 will allow it to unfold as the universe and God allows it to. And so when I look at these four, I really think that this is at the crux of what we are facing with collaborative change. You've got mind, body, spirit, and emotion. The mind and body really are hitting at the head. The spirit and the emotion are getting at the heart. And everyone is right. There is no one right answer. The thing is in our world right now, people come into change and collaborative events, and they look at changing an organization or transforming their community or whatever it might be, and they will pick one of these and think, taking a mental approach, get rid of the emotion, forget about the spirit, and don't worry about the body. Don't worry about just taking action. We got to mentally work it. Or some people say, let's just get stuff done. I don't care about the other stuff. You hear about touchy-feely versus getting the work done, the task versus the relationship, all of those contrasting challenges. And here's the thing. True collaborative leadership is grounded in woundedness. Let me say that again. And John, I'm hearing a lot of background noise for you, and you're typing.
Well, I wasn't. Thanks.
Collaborative change is grounded in woundedness. So what is it? It's the what versus the why. And we've got to get really clear about any collaborative change and what differentiates collaborative change versus any other kind of change, directed change, dictatorial change, those kinds of things. It's the what and the why. We oftentimes are doing a lot of things and we're doing the what, it's action. And the why is at the core of it. And at the core is our woundedness. And if you think about yourself and you think about what gets you up in the morning to go out and do the work you do to try to make your world, your organization, your community a better place, when you do that, when you think about what really gets you up to go through the tough things, the tough work, to stay up late, to whatever it is that gets you, you're going to find it's grounded in some woundedness that you've had in your life. It can be in your personal life, it can be in your organizational life, but it is it's grounded there. And I love when Rumi says this. He says, the wound is the place where the light enters you because it informs you in the work you do. And I'm really curious in the chat room, for those of you out there, as you think about your work and what you're doing, what is the gift of the wound that was in your life? What is your wound and what is the gift that it has given you? I'd like you to think about that because that is at the core of collaborative change. That is at the core of what gives it the meaning, the why to the what. For me personally, I can tell you one story. When I was young, I was growing up in a family that had many highs and many lows, and my parents were divorced, and in all of the battles that were going on with all of that, and I'm as a 4, 5, 6, 7-year-old dealing and living in that environment, the kids get lost, and I think we got lost. I think I got lost, and I can remember a scene where I'm sitting out in my backyard, and I have my dog, and we're sitting under a bush, and I had impetigo, if some of you know what that is, and it's little sores that can be on your body. And I had these on my legs and on my arms. And I remember sitting there with my dog, feeling as alone can be. And I just remember sitting there, and my dog was licking my wounds. And I remember, if I reflect back on that now, it was comforting, and that was the one being on the planet that I felt cared about who I was, and I wasn't alone with him. And when I think of today and the work that I do, and the work I do to help people not be alone and to help us to feel connected, that one wound, and I have others, and I have other, a lot of gold experiences in my life as well. But that wound has informed me. I think of Kelly Ripka, who is a talk show host here in the United States. And she just about walked off her job, and she's a big-time talk show host because she was not treated well by the leadership. They kept a secret from her and then announced it to everybody, and she found out at the last second. She walked off the show for a week. And when she came back on, she said, I work and I have my home, but my work here, I've been here for 20 years, and this is my second home. And I work for this company, and they treat me with disrespect. And respect is what it's all about. And for her, in that woundedness, it informs her in what she may do from here in her work, in her organization. And so it is a gift. And so when we collaboratively lead and manage, facilitate, consult, train, and develop, let me tell you, collaboratively leading, facilitating, consulting, training, developing, whatever it is that we do, it's different than leading. It's different than facilitating, because collaboratively leading gets at that core purpose for what we are willing to work really hard for, because we care and it matters to each of us. And so to basically change anything, we have to get a whole system in the room. And here's the interesting thing. And each person brings that wound. Each person brings that purpose, that passion that they care about that's connected into it. Because our gift is connected to that wound. So the gift becomes the light. The gift becomes the gold. And in that gift, we all bring it. And now, collaboratively leading, managing, facilitating, educating, whatever it might be, we all are sitting there, and you are sitting there figuring out, how do I bring all of these different passions, callings, in this organization that has a unified passion and calling, or how do we get this system of disparate stakeholder groups to collectively agree on something that they can move together, can move forward on? And that is what collaborative change is all about. So the methods that have been developed are from all around the world. And the Change Handbook and a variety of other things that NEXUS has been advocating for over the years and working with ISODC on and so forth. The collaborative methods, they connect people in the organizations to problems and possibilities. And what we do with these methods, you've got these collaborative methods, these techniques for bringing the people together in the room, in person or online, and different synchronously or asynchronously. And these people can be applying the methods or advancing the methods as practitioners or scholars or leaders and educators, students and activists to a particular problem that may be out there. And the methods can only come to life and make an impact in helping to create a better world where we collectively can move together. That can only be done through people in those organizations to address those problems. And on the right here on the screen, what I'm saying is, what's interesting in my work is that people come and they are so committed to doing good work in the world. And you got the beginners that come and they want to get right into the methods, and they want to do the methods and figure out how to facilitate a meeting and then use it in their organization. And they eventually start getting to asking the question of problems and possibilities. And then when I talk to the people that have been doing this for many years, they're out there wrestling with big issues. And they are coming backwards saying they got to work with people in organizations and draw from the methods. And what's interesting, our beginners and our masters are passing each other. And we need to find better ways to help our masters and our beginners, our advanced and intermediate, connect to each other so that we can all learn in different ways. And that's really what I think this is about today as well, is how do we learn to use these methods in more impactful ways. So when we think about this, what I'm going to walk you through is talk with you about these different levels, and when you think of how do you apply the methods. First, in learning the methods, it's important to understand the foundation of the methods, of collaborative methods. It's important to see the patterns in the methods, and that's where the 6 design elements that I've talked about on many occasions are used to help unpack and uncover the connection amongst all these methods. See the foundations, get grounded in that, and begin to apply it to 1 to 3 hour events. And if you're new to this, you're coming from the bottom towards the top. And if you've been around for a while doing this work, you're beginning from the top and coming down towards the bottom a lot of times, and we're connecting this stuff. And so there's 1 to 3 hour events, and there's 1 to 3 day events, 1 to 3 day events, and there's 1 to 3 year initiatives. And then there's also collaborative change practice. And so as you're doing your work, what you'll see is you're going to be working in one of these areas or one or more of these areas, because we all do this work, care about the work, and then we begin to ask, how can I take it out into the world? I would suggest the beginners start with foundations and patterns in 1 to 3 hour events and build up and so forth. And we'll be talking about that today. So in designing a collaborative event, and as I mentioned, we're going to focus on the foundations, 1 to 3 hour events and 1 to 3 day events. And we're going to kind of talk about blending collaborative events around those particular first 3 levels. And the design begins, of any event, the design begins with 3 questions. This comes from Ron Lippitt and built on up. And the design begins with question number 1. What is the purpose and outcomes? It's the why. Why are we doing this? Why are we going through this change? Why does it matter? What do we hope to achieve with this? How do we want the world to be different because of what we're doing? These are results. What is the purpose? The second question is who needs to be involved? And the third question is what conversations need to take place? So you got your purpose, you got your audience, your attendees and participants, and then you've got what conversations, you got your agenda. What conversations need to take place? Another concept that applies to the collaborative change events when we go into an event is the agenda. When you look across most agendas, what you're going to find is the change formula is embedded or implied in the experience that people have, whether it's 1 to 3 hours or 1 to 3 days. You'll find that in it, the formula says that D times B times F times S must be greater than R to create real change in that experience that people are having. And so when you bring people together in the room and begin the process, after you've gotten clear about the purpose and outcomes, and you've got clear about who's coming in the room, then you go to what conversations need to take place. And the conversations will typically follow through the DVFS. And that is creating a dissatisfaction with the current situation, a common database, and I also call it creating a desire for change. That multiplied times a vision of possibility, what people yearn, a compelling possibility for the future. Multiplied times first steps to take in the short term to move to action, supported by structures and mechanisms to ensure follow through. The multiplication of those, the product of those 4, must be greater than R, the resistance to change, in order to create real change. And so when you look on the left, the tipping point, the more and more people that you engage their head and heart around DVFS, the more people you engage around DVFS, as you engage more and more and more groups and more people, you start moving up and up. The change is slow, but you'll hit a critical mass and bam, off the change will take. It will be very fast, and the speed of transformation will take off. And so you can see a tiny URL link right there. You can click on that, or you can go to that, and that will take you to the article on this and tells the history of how this formula was created. It's a really good historical article, and then it brings you up to date on the formula. And so when we are creating collaborative change, we're looking at creating the conversation and building the dialogue and the experience such that people connect their head and heart around the DVFS in the course of that experience. Another principle to consider when you bring people in the room is this notion of converge diverge. So convergence is when people are out doing work in the organization, you've got to bring them into the room figuratively or in person, so by distance or in person, and create some type of experience in which they come together and they have that DVFS so that they can go back out and get that work done and begin the work and then converge back again. So in organizational change, we're creating lots of convergence and divergence, and convergence and divergence. And that's where you use these change roadmaps and long-term change initiatives. I'm going to be focusing today on both the 1 to 3 hour event and the 1 to 3 day event. And after that becomes the 1 to 3 year initiative, which weaves together these 1 to 3 hour events with these 1 to 3 day events, and weaves them together over time as people converge and diverge to create a large-scale change initiative, or to implement a large-scale change initiative. Then there is max mix, systemic breathing. You bring people into the room, and how do you have them sit? Well, the first things first is people sit in circles. We have moved in our society to rows and aisles. We go to meetings and sit in rows and aisles. We go to classrooms and sit in rows and aisles. And the world began with the circle. And we sit in circles is where we can have the best connection, the best conversation, and have the best collaborative experience. And so in the circle, it's important to have a max mix. So whatever the system is in the diverse stakeholder groups that are all engaged in the change, whoever all those groups are, once you identify them, you want to make sure that you're arranging the conversations in small groups to be a max mix of those perspectives. It can be ethnic and gender and age. It can also be geographic. It can be functional. Whatever the appropriate perspectives are to increase the maximum mix of perspectives sitting in the circle to create a microcosm of the whole, that's what you want. So what you're looking at here are people sitting in circles that are a microcosm of the larger system that's being represented. And you have them sit in a max mix. The second principle that's really important in the conversation you have in these sessions is systemic breathing. That is, you can see the woman there at the center and she's talking. Design the agenda such that each person has a turn in having their voice heard, expressing their opinion and contributing to the conversation. Google just did some amazing group research, and you can go Google's research on groups and teams, what makes for great groups and teams. And they've done a really good job with this. And one of the key factors they said that differentiated an amazing group from a not so amazing group. And they looked at comparing smarts and capability and skill sets. None of that told them what made a great group different from a not so great group. One of the characteristics was that the groups that were great ensured everybody in the group had voice. They made sure in their meetings that each person spoke up and they listened and asked. And just because someone is not saying anything doesn't mean that you're not responsible as a part of the group to say pause and say, hey, tell me what you think. Ask them a compelling question. Ask them what they don't agree with. Say, what would you say no to? Because that'll tell you a lot. You're not always asking people, or do you agree with this? Maybe get them to tell you what they don't agree with. Find ways to ask questions that brings everybody in the group into the conversation. That is really important. Once that individual speaks, and then the next one speaks, and the next one speaks, everybody in that circle speaks, then the group pauses and makes collective sense. What are the themes in what we all said? What's important here is to ask the question such that you're asking about what was common in what we said, but what was unique to one or two people. You want to honor the unique perspective, which may be the needed perspective, as well as identify the common themes. And in doing that, you're making a group consensus, or a group meaning. You're making group meaning. Then, in the design of the session, you want to pause and allow each of the groups to share their ideas, their discussion out with the whole, so that the person on this side of the room hears a theme from the other side of the room, and what you'll find is the groups will be saying similar things, and they all of a sudden feel connected. What happens here is you end up with individual group whole conversation, which creates a systemic breathing. The system is breathing. So I'll pause. Any questions out there? John, Stan, any questions, reactions to what I've shared so far?
There's been some good reactions to the wound question. Some people feel that their wound has given them patience and a desire to see a quality. That was from JJ. Adrian said that their wound keeps them grounded and non-judgmental. Mackenzie said the wound gave them strength and a better understanding of themselves. Tracy said strength, perseverance, independence, and self-reliance. Overall, there were some other reactions just kind of within the chat room around using your wound as inspiration and driving towards positive action. Sometimes positive action can also put people in situations that make them feel like they're in over their heads. And sometimes in frustration, they're not able to do what they want to because of external factors monopolizing their time.
Yeah. And what's your reaction, John?
To which?
Anything.
To which section?
Any of it.
Oh, for me, it's just it's a good recap of stuff, concepts that I've written on, and concepts that we've used in our practice. I love using the DVFSR model, and the systemic breathing portion. Individual group whole is always good. It's always good, and people usually get it when you're facilitating an event and you tell them you're sitting in circles or you're sitting in a circular area, and it's intentional so that you all will have your bring your individual wisdom to the table, work it through to collect some themes as a group, and then call it out to the larger room so that we all are better as a result. So I always like hearing that and having that be described.
Yeah, and someone said, can you elaborate on systemic breathing? And I'll elaborate by saying I would keep it really simple. When you design the conversation, you're putting people in max mix groups, and then create whatever activity, whatever the discussion, whatever method you're using, from World Cafe to Open Space to Future Search to Appreciative Inquiry to Whole Scale Change to whatever it might be, whatever the questions you're using in that small group, make sure that it's set up such that each person answers the question, and then the group looks at the themes amongst themselves, common and unique, and then be sure to share that out, because what you have happen is each person has their voice, the group makes collective sense of that voice together and what's common and unique, and then by sharing it out with the whole room and using techniques across the methods to share it in the room, it's called harvesting. It's called a common and unique report outs, or popcorning. There's a lot of different terms based on the method. When it gets shared out with the whole, each small group sees that the other group is having similar conversation to them, and they feel instantly connected across the room. So I become aware as a group of the whole system in the room. I feel connected as a whole, and you can take 500 people and have a whole room conversation in 30 minutes. Whereas if you try to have everybody answer that question, you'd be there for a week.
Right.
And then Roland says, I'm talking about let's basically help people slow down in order to go faster. And I think there was a question around how do you push back on the tendency to want to do things quickly. I think there's a lot of things. One is using good analogies to help people understand. I think it's doing a lot of the pre-work. I think it's showing case studies and providing evidence. And then at some point, people will do collaboration because they have no other choice, because they've exhausted all others. And they'll try it because they don't have anything else. So it's all, you never know. It's either building trust, it's using a good analogy, it's upfront selling, it's already having more of a, you have enough people that say yes, you have a leader definitely that has to buy in at some point to that, or they will undermine it if you try to go longer than one event.
Steve?
So let me give you a case study. Yeah, does somebody want to say something?
Yeah, I'm just reflecting on Stanley. I'm just reflecting on what you're saying, and I think one of the things that comes up is when people are looking at their past and looking at that woundedness, it helps in terms of how it forms them. And I think that informs the purpose that individuals form throughout their life path. And most organizations that we also encounter seem to be challenged in trying to align, and I don't mean this in a manipulative way, but aligning individual purpose to organizational purpose. And that's where that spiritual wisdom and that balance kind of really becomes important. So we're in a room, when we've got these groups of smaller groups working in circular tables or working in circular ways and using different facilitative techniques, when we can find out the individual purpose and the organization purpose towards solving problems and bring that to consciousness, that often helps informing the solutions that the group then comes up with. And that comes up sort of by itself. It comes up naturally.
Mm-hmm. That's really good. And, you know, Tracy said, I agree that going slow is a good thing. However, what can one do when the exhaustion kicks in because we can't maintain the endurance needed to make a positive change? And I think of it like a gas tank with an empty to full, and I think of it as a collaboration tank, in which the tank, you know, that is, I want to always be full. I want to do collaboration full on with everything and all the bells and whistles all the way through. However, I got to find out where the system, the organization, and that diverse stakeholder groups, where they are. And I got to find what level of collaboration they're currently at. And then I've got to use the yoga analogy of stretch them just beyond what they are currently doing to the point that it doesn't hurt them. And in yoga, they always say, you know, stretch and then stretch a little bit further. And so you got to find that point and then stretch them a little bit further. Fill more of that tank up with collaboration. And you do that by using design teams and other types of ways of really listening to the system, telling you and being a partner with you in designing the collaborative event. That is critical to ensuring good design. And that is having a representative sample of the organization be a part of a design group that helps you design the actual collaborative event that you're about to embark on. So let me give you an example here with a case study. And Stan, this is Arian, and I wrote this article, and this is a project he worked on, and an ICT company in South Africa. And
right.
You can see the article that we published in ODJ there, tinyurl.com/World Cafe in SA. And you can see the full article there that describes this. So here's the background to this case study. In this particular organization, they had implemented a strategy that's focused on improving service delivery and support in an attempt to improve customer satisfaction. And what they were focused on is breaks in service delivery, i.e. breakdowns or mistakes or what they called incidents. And they wanted to get the days between incidents to, so if we had an incident today, they'd like not to have another mistake for a long time. So the bigger the number of days, the better. Because you wanted to have a lot of days after you had an incident. No mistakes or no accidents, so to speak. And so that was their goal, is to have a lot. And so they initiated what they called 80 Days Around the World, a program, and they launched it with a braai. And you know this, Stan, a braai, some cool T-shirts, some posters, a great communication plan, and everybody's going to get it, hurrah, and go, and 80 days between incidents. The longest period of service stability was 24 days they had. The unintended consequences were employees became discouraged. All the resets in the program started losing significance and credibility. The employees did not support or understand the guidelines for the change or even why they were doing it or what constituted. They didn't even know what made for an incident. And the employees, they interpreted this as just another management intervention. And what it looked like was this. They'd have an incident in 5 days, and then another incident in 2 days, and then another incident in 7 days, another incident in 2 days. And the biggest number of days was 24, then 16, then 1, then 3. And, you know, management really, you know, they found themselves in an unfortunate position of having to continue with the program, but they didn't have the support from the employees. And they were about to lose millions due to the operational pressure from the site and the management team. They did not want to have the luxury, they didn't want to take the luxury of using an OD-related intervention, and they're about to lose the client. And so the management said, let's do a bigger braai. Let's get some more cool T-shirts, and let's make bigger posters. And Arian said, let's think about this differently. And he was able to get them to listen because they felt they were out of options. That was it. They weren't bought into it. When they actually got to going, the whole executive team was so nervous they showed up for the event. And the intervention was they only gave them 2 hours to do a collaborative event. And they had 120 people, and 90 employees were able to show up. And they used a World Cafe, so this is using one method, not a blend of methods. It's using one method. And what they did is they had 3 rounds of conversation in 2 hours. And round 1 focused on, and this is when I talked about, you can use the DVFS formula to guide your agenda, to guide the conversation in a World Cafe or whatever kind of event you're doing. And so, how do you feel about the service improvement program was the first round of questions, getting at the D, the dissatisfaction, the desire for change. Round 2 was what will happen if we don't have something like the service improvement program. It's kind of the opposite of what do we yearn for. It's saying what will happen if we don't have this, which was really getting at what's our vision. It was an interesting way of asking that question. And that's where design team helps you get questions that you may not have thought about, because you might have thought about what do you yearn for. This was the way of getting at vision there. The design team helped them do that. Round 3 is how can we improve the service improvement program to achieve exceptional results. And they went through round 1, round 2, and round 3, and the conversation was rich. The ideas were impactful to the point that the manager and the executive team were literally blown away. And the manager, with enthusiasm, was like, this is amazing. The manager walked in sweating bullets, not believing that the room had the wisdom or the expertise or the know-how to really fix this, and not believing that it could work in 2 hours. And the manager, on the spot, formed an implementation team with people in the organization, the people in the room, a max mix group. And that's the first thing that Arian said was, he wants to form a team, and he said, we'll get a maximum mix, get a representative group of the whole to form this team. And what happened? After the World Cafe event, the next incident was 25 days. The next one was 44 days. The next one was 68 days. The next one was 81 days. And that just was the end of the study that he was evaluating. He said it went on beyond 120 days. 2 hours. The time spent, and if you think about the millions saved by keeping the client and also the millions saved by not having all those errors every few days, is amazing. What did the participants say? A perfect opportunity for interaction with other employees. I felt good to participate in something like this. I often feel we are just sitting in our offices doing our job, but we don't really communicate with the people around us. And this created that opportunity. I didn't feel like an outsider anymore. Contribute. In a normal forum like the official site communication session we have on a monthly basis, let me emphasize this. In the normal forum, i.e. rows and aisles, where you're talked at or to, like the official site communication sessions we have on a monthly basis, you're not given an opportunity to air your views. Seeing that we could caused others to air their views and speak the truth. Alignment and ownership. This was the first time it was really communicated well. People could see and understand what it was about. And just this communication already made a big difference. It is more fun and not as rigid as it was before when management initiated it. It now belongs to all of us. People support and defend that which they help to create. Questions? Comments? John?
I'll enter that into the chat room now. If you guys have your questions or comments, keep putting them in there. I always like hearing that people support and defend that which they help to create. So that's good.
So what are you seeing out in the chat room? Stan, what are your reactions to what we're saying so far? Any questions you have?
So our experiences are fairly similar to you, Steve, and I think the more the collaborative process is, and the shorter, more focused, sharp questioning of common issues, the more the wisdom of the group is brought into consciousness and the solutions are found internally. So these methods, without a question, work and are the only way to do a lot of the OD work that we're all involved with.
Lots of good comments. John, do you have anything you want to add?
I was just going to, and you might have been bringing it in too. Roland said in the chat room that if leaders model collaboration, it's more likely the rest of the system will follow suit. And I agree with that too. I also think that sometimes we have to teach leaders to be more collaborative as well. So it's nice when leaders model that and bring it down, but I think sometimes as especially from an external perspective, you have to work with the leaders, and you're really helping them to learn the methods, but also kind of working with them to figure out the best way to incorporate that into their system.
Yep. And JJ says, what about piloting change in one area? In this case, this was piloted with this one area because it was one service center next to a big client. And so you can imagine what happened after that in terms of other places. What you want to do when you pilot is you take where the group's most willing to do the work and do a collaborative event, and what you do is you engage other people outside of that immediate system that's doing the work and invite them to come in and participate in different ways, either to come in and watch, maybe to come in and for a particular meeting, whatever's appropriate, but you try to get them to come in and engage them in different ways. Second is you want to document and tell a story, like we're doing with this case. By writing it up and telling the story, it makes an impact, because when people read it, I can share this story now with someone else who is looking for how we might do it. So piloting, sharing the story, inviting people in, and having it be an example for others is all different ways to help do that. And if you don't have, and Tracy talks about what if you don't have, if we technically don't have legitimate power compared to the owners. I'm not sure I understand the question, but I'm just going to take a stab here in that the people in the room that don't have the legitimate power, they have more power than they realize. And oftentimes leaders are very aware of the power of the collective voice. And sometimes they're afraid of putting them in the room to have collective voice because they're afraid it's going to create even more collective power. And if you're in those situations, you really got an uphill battle, because you got to show the leader that when the group is wise and they are connected, they can make good decisions that will actually be in the best interest of what everybody's trying to achieve together. It just takes trust and time in building that collaborative leadership culture, or that collaborative culture in the organization. So that was one method, World Cafe. What about multiple methods? What do you pick? And do you have to pick a method? How do you do all this? And so this is getting at the second notion, which is mastery. All of you out there are building your mastery. And in the work that I've done, I've studied the people that have been doing this work for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, people who've invented methods that are from the World Cafe to the future search and open space and appreciative inquiry and whole-scale change and real-time strategic change and all those things. And it's talking with and studying and being with them and those practitioners and studying people doing this work. What I have found is that there is this mastery cycle in which people come into this work mastering a method. They become a devotee of a particular method. They may start out being really great with World Cafe, and they master that method. I think that's a good way to start. Get good at that one method. Then what happens is, as you get good with that method, you begin talking to people who are practicing other methods. You go to conferences, you go to workshops, you talk, you read, you get the bug and you start loving it. And all of a sudden you say, in this next event, this next collaborative event, maybe I'll blend a couple other methods in. And so you bring in an activity from appreciative inquiry with World Cafe, and you might bring another activity in, and you begin blending. And that moves to invention, where you, over time, invent and create new methods, new techniques. Let me give you this as an example with martinis. Stan, do you like martinis? Stan?
This is John. I do.
Okay, I'm good. I think Stan's having a martini. He maybe had too many. Anyway, so you take a martini, and you're having friends over for a martini party. And you've always learned how to make, the traditional martini. And now you want to have a martini party, and you're bringing other stuff, and fruits, and juices, and spices, and syrups and chocolates and all kinds of stuff. And you bring it in, you're having this martini party. And you know how to make the original martini. Now you have the martini party. And you start weaving and putting some stuff together, and you make this martini. You blend a couple things into the martini that you make, and you give it to somebody. And then you put some other different ingredients into another and put a little chocolate on it. You give it to somebody else. And you make another martini, and you put some fruit juice in and some mint leaves and a raspberry, and you give it to somebody, they go, man, that is really good. And then you kind of make the same one again a little bit. Put the fruit juice in with it and the mint leaves, and someone, oh, I love that. And all of a sudden people are like loving this martini you're making, and so you kind of make it the same way again, and you make it the same way again. So you've been blending and putting a lot of different stuff together, but now you're making this one martini. And people start saying, I love it. Can you make that one that you made for Joe and for Stan and for John? Can you make that one? And so you make it again, and you make it again and say, hey, make it exactly the way you made it for them, because you're getting predictable results. You're getting this great impact on the people that are using it. And then all of a sudden, you get to a point where someone says, what are you going to call it? And I say, well, I'll call it John Spalding Martini. And voila, I've just invented an approach. That's what happens in the cycle of mastery. You master a method. You begin weaving and blending and mixing and matching different techniques and activities in as you design different collaborative events, 1 to 3 hour or 1 to 3 day. Over time, you start getting predictable results, and these results are desired results. And before long, you start repeating that and doing that same design over and over again, maybe a little tweaking, but really it's the same design over and over again. And before you know it, you have a method, and it's called World Cafe. That is how the masters of collaborative change go through the cycle, because once World Cafe is invented, then it becomes a method. People master it, they begin blending, and they start inventing. And that's how we create a world where we all collaborate together and are innovating and creating a vibrant community of methods and approaches and keeping us fresh and always changing and always ready and always evolving as we all get collectively more smart and intelligent as a world. Questions? John?
Tracy wants to know, what if you forget how to make the perfect martini?
What if you forget how you made the perfect martini? Here's a great question. Tracy, what's really important is to be documenting the story, developing good documented agendas, good handouts, keeping your flip charts, taking notes, taking pictures, making a journal. Keep all of that stuff, and you document it, boom, and then document the next one. Write it up, and before long, you'll start seeing that pattern.
And
anything else?
One more from Karen. How do you account for interpersonal dynamics or gendered power dynamics when trying to co-create collaborative change efforts? How do you equal the playing field and account for either introvert, extrovert, or some type of gendered power dynamics?
First, it's never perfect, but it's better than not doing anything. The first thing you do is you have a design team that's a max mix, that has all those perspectives. You ask them how to create the conditions and ensure everybody has input. You'll know that in this particular organization or system, you'll have a particular voice that needs to be nurtured or helped. And you're going to have a particular voice that needs to be balanced. What?
Just for people who might not know that either, explain the design team real quick.
Well, a design team is before any collaborative event, and I'll talk about this again, so I think it's good to talk about multiple times. Before when you know you're going to have a collaborative event, bring people together to work on some compelling question or need or issue, it's important to take representatives from the system that's going to be in that room, a subsample of that. So let's say you're going to have 100 people in the room. You might want to take 15 or 10 that represent all the diverse perspectives. Get that 15 in the room and design the agenda, design the event, and use them to ensure that you're thinking about what's the purpose, who needs to be in the room, and what conversations need to take place. And a lot of times, what will happen is you bring them together, and they'll recognize that there's a stakeholder group that's not there. I've done an event with a school system in which it took a little while for them to actually agree that it was important to have students in the room at the tables with them, even though they thought they weren't mature enough to have a conversation about their education. They did it, and it turned out great. So a design team is really important to doing that. And a design team then helps you figure out how do I set up the small groups, how do we get to have max mixes sitting at the groups, and then how do we design the questions and the activities, and which activities do we pull from, and which different methodologies do we pull from to help us create the conditions for people to have voice and to create a level playing field. And that's all a part of the design process that you use. So, another case study, collaborative leadership using large group meetings to cause rapid change and breakthrough performance. This is another article. It's a chapter in a book. It's a project I worked on with John and John and John. And these are three former students in our Master of Organization Development program at BGSU, our alumni now that we're very proud of, doing lots of great work out in the world. And John Hine happened to be working in ConAgra at the time as one of the top OD and leadership competency development experts and directors. I can't remember his exact position. And John Meenick and John Spalding worked on the event and contributed to it. And so I was called and asked to come in and work with their organization, and this was a really unique situation. The president was really looking at creating a breakthrough performance and setting the conditions for leading for growth as an organization. And what we had is a purpose that he established was then used as a starting point for the design team. So a lot of times in these particular events, leaders or somebody in a formal position of influence is going to initiate the need to bring people together and agree that we need to bring our group together in a different way, because the way we've had our conversations in the past, the way we've worked on things in the past, hasn't always worked well for us, and we need to have a more impactful meeting. We need to have a more impactful annual planning event, and in this case, it was an impactful annual planning event. And what we did is, and what he did is, he was bringing the top 150 leaders together for their annual planning event. The leaders ran a $500 million to $3 billion operation of some kind. So these were the top leaders in the company, and then they had the senior leadership team, the SLT, that was convening with them as they planned their upcoming year. And their goal, as I mentioned, was to focus on breakthrough performance. And they wanted to do it in a different way. So day one, and what I'm going to be showing you here is what a blended event design, a 1 to 3 day, this is a 2-day blended event design looks like. I just gave you a previous example of a 1-day, one method, or basically a 2-hour, one method event. Now I'm giving you a 2-day agenda here with ConAgra that blended multiple methods together. And they went from no more rows and aisles. They typically came together for their annual planning, and a lot of the decisions were made ahead of time in the back rooms and through other meetings and communications to decide who's getting what, who's doing what, and the goals and so forth. And then they sat for 2 days listening to a litany of presentations in rows and aisles. John, who was from our program, proposed a different design, a collaborative event design. And so you can see here they're sitting in max mix, and day one was different. When they walked in the room, they immediately knew something was different. And so on day one, you can see how the design here is going to follow DVFS. Now what you do in creating a blended collaborative event, you want to begin to look at all the different methods like whole scale change or appreciative inquiry or future search, and you pull specific activities out that will help you achieve the D, the V, the F, and the S. And in this case, particular activities from whole scale change were brought in to do the welcome and the opening and the panel discussion. And there's a technique by which panels share in short bursts of information. The people at the tables then turn and talk with each other about what they heard, what the reactions are, what questions of understanding they have. They then have a discussion with the panel, and it becomes very engaging. That moved into a discussion around what they felt was working and not working, and some of the challenges, and they had that discussion within the context and with the panel in that front part, along with what the must-dos and key bets were from the senior leadership team giving their presentation. So they gave, and you kept it to 30 minutes, and they give a 30-minute joint presentation. One person speaks for 5, one speaks for 7, one speaks for 3. They share that, they have this conversation, they ask questions of understanding, and they begin to address what's working and not working. That moved into a vision for the future where they were starting to envision what kind of leading for growth meant. And they had table discussion around this, and they had done some pre-homework where they were submitting ideas, and each table had 200 ideas that everybody in the room had submitted. And they, at the tables, boiled them down and integrated them. So each person got to discuss what ideas they liked. Then they collectively, as a group, said what do we all agree with, and what were maybe some common and unique themes in our views on these ideas. Boiled it down to a small number of ideas that they wanted to propose for the whole room. All the ideas went up on the wall, and then everybody went up and voted. And then they finished for day one. And there was an evaluation at the end of the day, asking people essentially, what was your biggest takeaway from today, and what do you recommend for tomorrow? The bulk of the room went to a barbecue dinner. However, a small group representing each table, so each table picked one or two people representing their table to stay behind, and they actually skipped dinner, and they worked on all the voting with the senior leadership team. And the senior leadership team and these representatives from the table, about 50 people, now it's probably more like 35, 40, I think. I'm going from memory here. But it seems like it was more than that. But it was probably around 40 for sure. And that 40 broke up all these ideas, started working on the voting, and they began to pare it down so they could present the top ideas the next day. And they boiled it down to 8 breakthrough ideas that they felt would make the biggest difference in the organization. And I'm going to the chat room here. The chat room, I had to click on it. So one person said, just because we've been doing something for 20 years doesn't mean we have been doing it right. At ConAgra Foods, we do not do a very good job of change management. We need to be vulnerable, open to change in order to really look at new ideas and thoughts and be more effective. That was one of the comments on the evaluation. So when they came in the next day, we began to blend in open space. So they walked into a different design. They walked into a room that was a circle, and there were 8 ideas that were going to be presented. And what was done was that in the circle, the people that were from the previous night that had the most energy around the idea partnered up, and they might have 1 or 2 people that had the chart, the piece of paper, the idea on one big flip chart paper, and they stepped forward into the circle, and they said, this is an idea that we care about. We invite you to come work with us on this idea. And then it went up on the wall. And the next one went up on the wall. And once they went up on the wall, the open space concepts were presented in terms of, for those of you that don't know it, it's very simple. It is basically go to the idea you're most interested in working on, use your feet to take you there, and whoever shows up are the right people. However long you work on it, it's the right amount of time. When you're done, and whatever happens is the only thing that could. And if you're not getting or contributing what you need to be contributing, use the law of 2 feet, get up and move to a different idea. And so people were invited, go pick the one idea that you are most drawn to committing your time and energy this year to seeing succeed. And the whole 150 in the room got up, and they went up and signed up for the different ideas. It looked like this. You can see a person presenting the one idea in the room to everybody, showing it to the senior leadership team, turning around and showing it to everybody. If you look beyond, you can see in the wall the little pieces of paper that is saying where the idea 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 are going to be posted. And then the room, people got up, signed up for it. They then went to small group room. They went in and they started working their own DVFS around that idea. They looked at the data and their desire for change around the idea, their vision for the idea, concrete first steps for the idea, and how they need to support the follow-through on it. They then came back and they actually asked breakthrough asks. They were each challenged to say, what's the one thing you want to ask of your senior leadership team in order to succeed? And it's got to be a breakthrough ask, something that's really compelling. They came back and they asked these tough questions. And one team came back, and it's very interesting. I wonder if I have this here. I think, let me see where this is. Yeah, no. One group came up and said, we have a question for you. We'd like to know, in addition to the ask, they said, we want to know, can you tell us what does one ConAgra mean? Do you all have an agreement? on what one ConAgra means. And this was this big campaign around one ConAgra. And the CEO looked down the aisle down the row at the other senior leadership team members, and they all looked at each other and they said, "No, we're not on the same page around what that means." The room broke out in applause. That was the first time they felt like maybe not the first time, but that was a very authentic response that they were moved by. And so it's that kind of conversation and those kind of breakthrough asks and having that conversation with your leadership that made the difference. And then they went back to work in their teams to develop their plans, developed a report out, which they came back and they reported out on the key actions that they were going to take. Public pronouncements from the small groups to the whole room saying, we're going to do these 3 things, and this is my public pronouncement, is huge in moving from the F to the S, moving to action. And then the senior leadership team, each person championed one of the ideas. They set a date for a report like 6 weeks later that they were going to, each of the teams was going to have their team leader come back and report to the senior leadership team on their progress and ask for what they need. So day 2 looked very different from day 1. And it was a blended design from using small circles to a big circle breaking out to small circles. And it was blending together open space, future search, appreciative inquiry, World Cafe, and project management techniques and activities, weaving them all together into one collaborative experience. The CEO for ConAgra said at the end, I feel really good that we are going to raise our confidence level, meaning our ability to actually achieve our objectives and hopefully beat them because we are going to be thinking and acting differently. And he felt that the event helped to shift them in that direction. We're going to wrap up in about 3 minutes, so I'll just see if there's any question. I have one more thing to share with you, and then I'll wrap up. And the last thing I'm going to share with you is what does the design process look like before, during, and after an event. It's just a quick little diagram to show you kind of what you want to do. It's very simple, but I think it's helpful in thinking about what you need to do before a collaborative event and right after. So, but I'll stop. John, any questions, reactions?
That was a very succinct example. Very cool how you kind of talked us through planning the event and how you talked through the blending of the different sessions, but then also the feedback and how you work with the leadership group and setting that up. I put it out into the chat room to see if there were any other questions.
Yeah, and I want to jump in on one. EP says something that's really important because I spoke at the Japanese Asian in Japan in the Asian OD Summit 2 years ago and helped facilitate the large conference. And we had in the room most people from Japan and China, and we had people from other parts of the world. And I will say that these methods work around the world, and people are drawn to them. And EP, what's really important is that if you're designing something in a culture, whether it's a national culture or a particular country or ethnicity, it's always important to have a good design team help you figure out how to design it so that it really engages them in the collaborative dialogue and the collaborative experience. Because I'll say it's more than dialogue. The collaborative experience includes words and graphic recording and facilitation to drum cafe to playback theater to a variety of other things. So I think it's really important to design well, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But I think that's a very important point to make sure that these methods and how they're blended together, and blending is really particularly good when you're considering the different cultures that you're bringing it into, and using a design team for that is very important. This might sound silly, but can you use DVS for anything that you need to evaluate a change with a group? I have found it works with anything that has to do with a person to a group to a conversation. It's all about, if we're trying to move and change, and whatever it might be, I don't care if it's a 10-minute conversation and we're trying to figure out what we got to do something differently, I'm going to have DVFS in that conversation embedded. I would just have it. I have it, it's there. If you try thinking through, it's all, whatever it is, it's going to be buying a car to, whatever it might be.
Yeah, it's just such a simple equation to look at what you really need in order to have the momentum to make the change happen and overcome the resistance and make sure that you have enough structure and sustainability in place. But
Yep. And Bruce says he's used them successfully in Japan and Asia. There are indeed cultural differences in how the ideas are introduced and managed, absolutely. And that's where you get the mastery in this work. And that's where you become a master and become advanced and become good at it. And own that you're good at it as you step into that. Because facilitating collaborative change, you're holding a container. And people have to feel safe with you as a facilitator because they're stepping into conversation spaces that sometimes may be uncomfortable for them. And having a good design, well-structured, that's adaptable, and yet is structured at the same time, dynamic, and making sure that you are in a good space yourself. This challenges you to do your own work. There's a whole, in the field of organization development, self as instrument, and doing your own personal work. You really get a chance to grow personally in doing this work. I've had people cuss me out. I've had to sit there and have very powerful people say some stuff to me and then have to turn around and try to keep the container safe. I've had all kinds of things happening where people are not trusting it. I've had a leader call me the day before an event and said, I don't think this is going to work. I had to walk them through, keep them calm, and the last words he said was, "This better work." So you're holding the container and using the good principles that we've talked about here. These are principles that come from a lot of wise people. The Change Handbook has 60+ methods, but there's dozens of more that Nexus for Change has brought together, that we've brought together, and all of the wisdom of all these methods and these people and these experts. It really, really speaks to a set of principles that will help you be successful if you follow them. And last but not least, what do you do to design and implement an event? And so this is just my closing checklist for you as you come in. So in the center is this collaborative event, and someone says to you, "We got to bring a group of people together." Boom, there you go. Kind of start from there and work your way out. And you say, "Great, I'll be glad to help you." And you can use one method, or you can blend methods. This is your choice. It might be a 1 to 3 hour event. It might be a 1 to 3 day event. But you're being invited or asked to come and help create this event, to guide them, to facilitate, to lead, whatever it might be. So then you got to come back and you got to ask yourself, who's in charge? What are the different leadership roles, formal and informal leadership and power bases? You got to make sure those people are being touched upon and being included in that leadership circle and that power circle, and making sure that you're engaging them and understanding them and doing your best to help them embrace the principles. And you're always playing a little bit of give and take as you're trying to move that needle or move in that yoga pose just a little bit further. In that, you got your consulting group and you and the facilitating group and the teams. And together you're working to move towards that event. And what you do is you ask the leadership and these power bases and the people that are providing input, who needs to be a part of the event? Well, you first, before you did that, the 3 questions, you first ask them, what's the purpose of this event? What do you hope to be different in the world, and what outcomes do you want? And so the people will give you their outcomes, the leaders, and you'll create an initial purpose and outcomes. And you'll say, based on this, who needs to be in the room? And they'll talk about that. And you'll say, great, let's put together a design team that represents that larger group to help design the agenda so we make sure it's the right agenda and we can be successful. And they'll say, okay. So they'll give you the names, you'll work with them, and you might push them to think broader in terms of the stakeholders and who needs to be there. So this is part of your consulting and facilitative work and your expertise that you're bringing into the conversation. And you get this design team and you bring them together. And now the design team goes through their own experience in creating purpose and outcomes, building on and complementing the leader power bases purpose and outcomes. And you begin to look at the who needs to be involved. And you get clear about that and maybe broaden that a little bit. And then from there, you begin to work on the agenda, the conversations that need to take place. And that's the event design. Now, while that's happening, you'll have draft documents, like maybe a strategic plan or a particular proposed draft solution that will be brought to the event from leadership. So what you want to do is find out if there's anything that the leaders are bringing forward for consideration. You never want to ask a question that you already have an answer to. So if leaders already have an answer, get them to get their answer out on paper. Invite them to make it a draft and bring it forward to the larger collaborative group collaborative event and say, this is my best thinking, but I need you all to help make it better. And by having the leaders embrace the idea that they can bring an idea forward, and the group appreciates that from leadership because they want to know what their thinking is. They just want to know that it's okay to make it better. And so the leadership and power bases will help build that draft document. And they will build that draft document. I'd even put maybe a little line up to the draft document as well. And they'll go and work on that draft document to bring it forward, and we've built into the design. And in a traditional strategy summit, for example, the V in the DVFS is where the draft vision for the future of a strategy or strategic plan is presented. And the leader says, can you make this better? And then there's a series of activities that the group works on to make it better in that event. And so once you have the event and you go through your DVFS, you then have reporting. You have certain documents and collateral that come out of it sometimes, and I think it's always great to have an evaluation and results, have the key decisions. So all the consensus where the individual group whole, where the group is reporting out, and there's voting, and there's ideas, and there's consensus making, you document all of that into a report that gets at the D, the V, the F, the S, and it represents the DVFS in the reporting. Get rich media, infographics, and other types of things to represent the work in that event, and have that reported back out to everybody. And typically, if you're moving towards action, which is what collaborative events are all about, you're going to have some projects, some actions to take, similar to what happened with the World Cafe article, in which there were several ideas. They got a project team. The project team had several projects. They divided up in subgroups, and they began working on implementing sub-projects that improved the incident-free days. Similarly, in ConAgra, they had 8 breakthrough ideas, and the teams worked on 8 ideas. And then you have project management, use DVS, and good collaboration in the small groups to continue collaboratively engaging within the groups. And those groups now begin to use collaborative engagement principles to engage the people that are impacted by their project. And so then you begin collaborative project management. So you move from collaborative events to collaborative project management and collaborative implementation. And so this is just a general framework in terms of how you might approach a particular collaborative event you're invited to come into. So we're done. I'm open to wrapping up and saying goodbye. John?
All right, thanks, Steve. I appreciate that. And thanks to everybody out there for participating in the chat and sending your questions in. I tried to get in as many as I could. I will be getting you a copy of the slides for today. That'll come out after the session. I'm going to turn it over to Stan for a couple closing words as soon as I get the slide up on the International Society for Organization Development and Change. So, Stan, are you still with us?
And John, real quick, I'd like to ask everybody out there, we have a good group online. If you all could, I'd love to hear what's your takeaway, so a little Gestalt checkout. And that is, what is your thinking as you're leaving? What's a takeaway? What's something you might do differently? What's something that you found helpful? Any bumper sticker or a comment would be really welcomed. And so I'd love to hear that. Bruce said, here at the end, Bruce talked about leaders may fear they will lose control. Our job is not to promise, but to take them through it till they feel comfy enough to try it in a small way first. And Tom said, hey, thanks for this. Haven't seen us since the last ISODC conference. And Tom, I look forward to seeing you again at the next one. And so if any of you all, as you're checking out, if you could share some of your takeaways from today, just a bumper sticker, I'd really appreciate that. And I'll share that as the final comments. John, back to you.
Sure. And Stan, you still here? So Stan was...
Yes, thanks for that. Firstly, just apologies. I seem to be going in and out of Wi-Fi zone. And I hope you're able to hear me. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah, we can hear you.
You guys able to hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, it's just been slipping in and out of Wi-Fi zone. So Steve, just very quickly, say thank you very much. I mean, obviously, everything that you said makes absolute sense. The blended approach in terms of collaboration and using different techniques and finding what those are going to be amongst different stakeholders in the design is really, really critical. So thank you for sharing the wisdom on the process in itself. And obviously, that helps OD practitioners and ourselves and as a global community to bring that wisdom to the group in order to explore their own wisdom, which they then find their own answers collectively and consciously to the questions that they're addressing. So really thank you very much on behalf of ISODC and I think everybody in the room. And then perhaps just a little bit around ISODC, just about people who are perhaps interested in it. Obviously, we'd like to encourage you to join as members. We have free access to the OG Journal, which is obviously one of the most cited journals in the world. Steve was the editor at one point of it. A very, very useful resource with loads of information and wisdom of experiences that have been developed over many years and been refined. Also, we offer newsletters, webinars, events such as these, annual conferences and other collaborative opportunities around the globe, and we're happy to share wisdoms and learnings amongst everybody. Really, it's a community of growth and development for everybody. Special student opportunities to sharpen skills. We also have different membership rates for people across the globe to make access easier. And obviously, just the biggest thing is about friendship and developing relationships in an OD community that's really trying to affect both communities, organizations, and individuals positively in their growth curve. And really, that's what we find at ISODC. So we'd like to welcome you guys to everybody to participate in future events. The next one is scheduled for the 21st of July, which is with Anne Litwin. And she's going to be exploring new rules for women and how do we help women become successful in the changing world of work. And I'm sure that's going to be interesting to both men and female in a global audience. So again, thank you, Steve, for your contribution, John, for all your organization. We really appreciate it, and we're looking forward to partnering with you in future going forward.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Stan. And I just wanted to share a couple of final checkout comments from our audience. Chloe says, Bruce says, takeaway, I want to keep it simple. JJ says, get the whole system in the room for real collaborative change. Chloe says, thanks for putting this on, a great way to learn an approach to keep things organized, simple, and to keep things moving effectively. Tom says, I primarily used AI in my approach to cafe. I want to master this one a little more. Mackenzie says, I think it's beyond important to make sure that everyone has a voice, is being heard. It's important to understand that everyone in a group is thinking. Randy says, I enjoyed the simplistic breakdown of what is a complex process that can have lasting impact. Tracy says, be selective in selection of the design team. And Chloe says, I agree with Mackenzie also. And Tracy said, this was very helpful with a process our class 6015 is using. And I'm looking forward to my class. I'm teaching the next class in our Master Organization Development program. And we also are going to have a doctorate in organization development and change, or in change of some kind. We're working on that right now. We've got to figure out the permanent title for it. And so I'm looking forward to teaching our class in the master's program with the group coming up this summer. So John, thank you. Stan, thank you, and have a great day.
Yep, just a couple other announcements, everyone. So the slides will be coming out in 48 hours with the recording. And after the session, please take the survey in GoToWebinar. And if you don't get a chance to after the session, you'll get a link for taking the survey and letting us know how today's session went. So thank you all for being here, and have a great rest of your afternoon or evening, wherever you are.
Bye.